Hi. Okay, I have to start off with a disclaimer. I know this cuts into my 5 minutes, but after seeing that poll result where it said conservation is superior to public access, I've had to completely change my presentation as you read that first slide. But I'm going to defer to the interpretation of the question to mean not public access at the expense of proper management of those natural resources. So if I can go with that and you bear with me, I will continue with somewhat of what I presented or intended to present. So the Trust for Public Land, just briefly, since 1972, we've protected over 3.5 million acres of land valued at over $8 billion, yes, with a B. We've created and built over 500 parks throughout the nation. We truly believe that convenient access to these parks and natural lands creates a sense of place and ownership among the users. And importantly, to what John Robinson just said, it's going to empower the next generation of land stewards. We can't rely upon us as a group to be replaced with the next generation unless we have them and give them the same opportunities that I'm going to assume that everybody in this room had as you were growing up, being outdoors and enjoying the nature. So it's important to continue that, particularly as the population grows. And access to it is very critical. Just underscore the importance of access. We just launched in October in partnership with the National Recreation and Parks Association and the Urban Land Institute our 10-minute walk campaign. Essentially, it's a nationwide movement we're leading to ensure that there's a great park within a 10-minute walk of every person in every neighborhood in every city in the United States. And last I checked, there was at least 100 mayors from our larger and largest urban centers around the nation that have signed on. Our arguments, though, next slide. Our arguments for our parks and open space, though, must be more than a place to recreate or appreciate nature. Must be, and I'll be brave and assume that you've probably all seen something similar like this diagram, this flower diagram, expressing the various benefits that parks and natural lands provide to our built communities and to people. But I'm going to focus just briefly on sidebar notes on the economy and health, because I am finding in my line of work, in order to speak to a more general audience than probably was what represented in this room, you've got to hammer on some of these other points. And economy and health, and my most recent experience being key. We're living in a time where cities and counties and even states are competing for fewer and fewer high-paying or good, reliable jobs. Tax incentives to try to incentivize these businesses to relocate into our communities. The trend in the nation right now is not to invest in these businesses that are more easily relocating or choose to be where they want to be, but in the communities where we are already. So creating high-quality, amenity-filled communities that attracts businesses into the communities and attracts jobs is key to getting these jobs to come into our community. Millennials, they choose now more and more often, I don't know if it's the majority or not, that the quality of life for the community amenities where they want to live is number one, and then number two, they'll get a job. And access to these natural areas and parks are critical. Next slide, please. So knowing I only have 5 minutes, yes, the delay. The Legacy Trail. We work from the hinterlands to our urban centers throughout the nation, but these trail projects are my favorite because they're the linear parks that go through our built environment that impacts so many more people, so much more personally, and immediately when they're completed than a square patch of land out in the hinterland. So it really is close to home. How many people are familiar with the Legacy Trail, please? How many of those that have raised your hands, and raise them again, have used the Legacy Trail? How many think it's important to the community as a community amenity? Thank you for that, by the way. And access to this trail, the trailheads themselves serve as nature parks, such as the Culver House Nature Park, where it ends now. According to the Friends of the Legacy Trail, over 200,000 people last year used it, of which 44,000 are from out of the county, lest I say sales tax revenues and lodging and food and entertainment that come along with it. In fact, recent developments, housing developments, are advertising the fact that their communities are adjacent to the trail. So the existing legacy trail, the phase 1, as it's labeled on this, oh wait, there it is, existing legacy trail is about 10.6 miles. Next slide, please. And we are focused on trying to extend that, we and our partners. We are trying to extend that into downtown Sarasota, into Payne Park. And perhaps you can see on this slide that there's a service area that we've identified. And by the way, this service area isn't just a concentric circles of distance from an amenity. It's actually factoring in barriers to access. So within a 2-mile service area of this extension that is shown on this slide, you've got 54 parks, 50 miles of bikeways, 379 miles of sidewalks, 43 schools, safe routes to schools, safe routes to schools, 14, is that my cue? Oh my gosh, okay. And then 94,000 people, of which 23,000 are from low-income households. Equity is very important to our work. Next slide, please. And we're focused on South County's access to the Legacy Trail as well. And this slide shows how access to the Legacy Trail can provide access to natural areas. Next slide, please. These are the benefits that are well beyond just a place to recreate. Next slide, please. I'm going to trust that you're all familiar with it. Lastly, thanks to the wisdom and the leadership of the County Commission of Sarasota, they do see the various benefits of parks and open space and the Legacy Trail as a community entity. And this next slide, please. And they have placed on the ballot for Sarasota County voters in November this language that is up to the citizens to decide how important extending this trail and connections to it from Sarasota to Northport is. And our friends, our partners include the Friends of the Legacy Trail, the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast, and certainly financial support with the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. Thank you very much.